over at Google. I think he's been with Google like 12 years, maybe, something like that. He's been around through implementing Chromebooks and getting Google in education. He's been doing this for a little while. He's got a great resume. He's up here is a quote that he did, and I'm going to read it because it always follows him everywhere he goes. Don't ask students what they want to be when they grow up. Ask them what problem they want to solve and what they need to learn to build the knowledge, skills, and abilities to solve that problem. So I really like that. I think that's really exciting. And I think he'll talk more about that today. But anyway, everybody welcome Jaime Casap.
Good morning, everyone. So I don't live here. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. And anytime I come up here to do a session anywhere that is not directly related to Google, I get worried about traffic. Because, you come in the night before and you check, well, how long would it take me to drive there? And last night at 11 o'clock at night, it says 30 minutes. But you never know that the next morning during commute, it says 17 hours. But I didn't have to worry about that. I was like in this bizarro world where every road was clear. I was going in the opposite direction and like making fun of and waving at all the other cars on the other side of the road that were stuck in traffic. So I made it here in time. It was exciting. This was the thing that I was nervous about the most. Thank you for the introduction, Kim. I wanted to talk a little bit about education. I wanted to start with some contact information. I'm pretty active on Twitter. Just in terms of a resume or background, I've been at Google for the last 11 years, in my 12th year cycle. I was part of the team that launched Google Apps for Education into the university space at Arizona State University in Phoenix. And then part of the team that launched Google Apps in the K-12. We signed a state level deal with Oregon. And then part of the when I say team, I mean two of us that launched Chromebooks in education a couple years ago. So my job is to do this, to work across the different teams, to think about and talk about what the future of education looks like. So I'd love to keep track of what you guys are doing for the next 3 days. So if there's something interesting that comes up, or some quotes, or some research, or some data that you guys want to share on Twitter, and you think based on this keynote it would be interesting for me to see, please share that with me, because that's where I go for a lot of information from my personal learning network, which is on Twitter, where I get a lot of information and data about what's going on in the space. So I want to start with this idea of the importance of education. I mean, you guys are here on your day off. You just went through a whole school year, and then you're crazy enough to come back on Monday. You guys are insane. But why are we insane? Why do we care about education so much? It's because we recognize that education is what disrupts poverty. Education is what changes people's lives. Education is what changes societies. And I know this because it's personal for me. This is a personal passion I have. I am a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Any New Yorkers in the room? It's been a while, because you're usually louder than that, right? Because usually you can tell how long someone's been out in New York by how loud they yell when you say any New Yorkers in a room. It's like inside of you, like, ah! But I grew up in Hell's Kitchen of the 70s and 80s, which was not a nice place to grow up. Now you go, my daughter lives in New York, I'll get to that in a second, but she lives in my neighborhood. She would not be allowed to live in my neighborhood in the 70s and 80s. We wouldn't allow her to be there. Not a nice place to grow up, a lot of violence, a lot of murder, a lot of drugs, a lot of those things. I grew up with a single mother on welfare and food stamps, and I wanted out of that. And the only way to get out of that was to either play in the NBA. Oh, and by the way, does anyone have an extra ticket for tonight's game? No? Okay. Or to get your education. So I focused on getting my education, went to high school, graduated from college, went to graduate school, and here I am standing in front of you. My 12 years at Google, my 7 years at Accenture, and all the things that I've been able to do. Am I okay?
Yeah, it went off for a second.
All right. All the things that I've been able to do because of education. Now, I've had some amazing milestones in my career. I had one a couple of summers ago when the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, asked me to come speak to 200 students about the importance of education, to talk to them about why they should think beyond just graduating from high school, why they need to go to college and what skills they need to develop. And these are 200 kids in programs across the country that were growing up the way I grew up. And I said, let me check my calendar. I wish I was that cool. No, you just show up. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Showed up, they escorted me into the East Wing of the White House. And for those of you who haven't been in the East Wing of the White House, there's this amazing thing that happens where you feel like you walk into 1800. You feel like the pressure of the White House, and you're walking through the building and you're looking at all the presidential portraits, you know, the Ronald Reagan portrait, the Bush, the Clinton, the Kennedy portrait, that famous one where he's looking down, and you say to the person who's guiding you through this, like, hey, look, it's the Kennedy portrait. Like they hadn't seen it before. And he rolls his eyeballs. And I walked in, and this was actually taking place in the East Room of the White House, and this is what it looks like. And doesn't this look like one of those pictures you get at the fair? Where they green screen you into the picture? The most amazing thing about this picture is when I showed this picture to my friends, they were not amazed that I was speaking in the East Room of the White House. They were amazed that I owned a suit. They wanted to know if I rented it. But that's the one suit. I have one suit. And this is why I try to maintain my weight, because if I get, that's it. That's all I can wear. But here's the thing, right? That's the American dream. That's why we were all in education. Because if we can get our kids to work hard, get their education, focus on their skills, they can accomplish anything. They can speak in the East Room of the White House. Those are the things that we work on. You can take a ghetto kid from New York and put him in the East Room of the White House. That's the importance of education. That's the impact that you guys have on students. But here's the thing. You guys have an impact on students that you will never meet in your entire life. You could be teaching for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, and you're gonna have an impact on kids that you will never meet. And that's the real impact of education. Because now I have my kids. This is them. Don't awe them, you don't know them. I have a 24-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Yeah, some of you are realizing I can only handle one child at a time. And if you want to know the difference between them in terms of generation, my last Christmas, a true story, last Christmas, my daughter wanted a Polaroid camera for Christmas because she's a photographer, she does a lot of video, but she wanted a Polaroid camera because she remembered those when she was a kid. My 16-year-old was like, what's a Polaroid camera? And my 2-year-old was like, what's a camera? Right? That just shows you the difference between that. But my 24-year-old graduated from college a couple years ago, was living in New York, working her dream, working on television, doing the thing that she wants to do, and we never talked about college. We never had a conversation about college. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college and her mother went to college. She assumed she was going to graduate school for years because I went to graduate school, and her mother's a teacher and she went to graduate school. She assumed I was going to pay for it, but you know, that's we took care of that problem pretty quickly. But my 16-year-old is having conversations about what his higher education is going to look like. That's the impact that we have, that this goes on for generations, and my 24-year-old doesn't know that the reason she's getting to live in New York and working her dream job is because of my 4th grade teacher, and my 6th grade teacher, and my 9th grade teacher. That's the impact that we have in education. And if that's true, then we should probably take education very seriously. And as the superintendent said, the first thing we need to realize is that it's not about education being broken. It's not about that rhetoric that you hear about teachers are terrible and education is broken, because the truth is we've done some amazing things with education in this country. The graduation rate in this country in 1910 was 8%. The content that we teach kids today is so much stronger and better than it was even 40 years ago. Most parents won't admit to you when they stop helping their kids with homework because it got too hard for them. For me, it was 4th grade. Once my kids were out of 4th grade, I'm like, you're on your own. I don't know that stuff. We created a super powerful country on the back of the education system that we built in this country, from the first public schools we launched in Massachusetts, all the way through the GI Bill that we built, that we gave our war veterans. We built some amazing education systems. So to me, and I'm living proof that the education system isn't broken. and there's millions like me. The truth is, what we need to recognize is that the world has changed and that we don't live in this world anymore. We don't live in a world where we're preparing kids for these jobs any longer, and so we need to do what our forefathers in education did and take the best of education, the best of what we know of what good education is, and bring it to the next level and deal with this economy that we're facing today and deal with this world that we're facing today. Because we often talk about the future. We talk about preparing kids for the future. But the problem is that the future's already here. And a lot of that future has to do with computer science. The Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts that there will be 1 million computer science jobs available in the next 8 to 10 years, and I think that number is soft. And that's just for computer programmers. That doesn't include all the other jobs associated with computer science and all the other things associated with technology and all the other things associated with automation and robotics and everything else that's in this space. And this is in every state, in every industry, across the board, across the world. This is the impact that we're having. And when we talk to parents, parents want their kids studying computer science. We did a study that you'll find on our website with Gartner, and 9 out of 10 parents want their kids studying computer science. The problem is that only 1 in 4 schools are offering computer science to their students today. So we need to expedite that. We need to change that. Because this is also an economic issue. The average computer science graduate makes about 40% more money than the average college graduate in this country. And these are real numbers. I broke down some of these numbers for you here in California, just so that I can share these with you. The average salary for computer science graduates in California is $109,000 a year versus the average salary in the state of $55,000 a year. What happens to our communities, especially our most vulnerable communities, if all of a sudden we got $109,000 a year by kids in these communities? What's the economic impact to our communities with that kind of range in salary? And again, not in the future, not 20 years from now, but today, in California, there are 68,352 open computer science jobs today, right now. And in 2015, California graduated 4,029 computer science graduates. And as you can imagine, that 68,000 number is the largest in every, I use these numbers, these percentages in every state that I go, and you can imagine that the most computer science jobs are in California. And in 2016, only 10,244 high school kids took the AP computer science exam. And 27% of them were female. Only 370 schools in California offer the AP computer science course. That's 16% of the schools that offer AP programs in California. And those statistics, those percentages, that some states it's as low as 9, some states it's as high as 20, nowhere near good enough in terms of what we need to do in the realm of computer science and what we need to produce for what the future holds. Because the role of technology isn't a question anymore about whether we should be using it or how we should be using it. It's how we take advantage of the technology, because we've been talking about technology forever. Not even just in education, in society. We've been putting computers on airplanes for a long time. You know, when you fly and they tell you to put your phone on airplane mode and nobody ever does. We've been putting computers on airplanes all the time. This is a hard drive being loaded onto a Pan Am plane in 1956. If you ran a business and you needed to do data crunching or you needed to store information, you could rent that hard drive for $3,200 a month. It's a 5 megabyte hard drive. So we've been dealing with technology for a long time, and education's no different. In the 1900s, we were talking about how motion pictures were going to revolutionize education. And in the 50s, television was going to revolutionize education. All we need to do is put kids in front of Sesame Street and the world will change. And we've been talking about computers in education since the 60s. I remember I took a computer science class when I was in 9th grade because I was told computers were going to be important to my future. Even though they were right, but I had never seen a computer before. I think it was another 10 or 15 years before I saw another one. I took a computer class and I learned how to program in BASIC. I want to bring BASIC back, by the way. I learned how to program in BASIC, and I wrote like 5,000 lines of code, and the old people like me in the room will remember this. I'm to make a bird fly across the screen on a Commodore 64. You guys remember that?
Yes.
It didn't even look like a bird. It was just a squiggly line that just went up and down across the screen. So we've been talking about computers for a long time. Why is it different this time? Well, a couple of things are going on. First, we know what good learning looks like. We have some amazing research that we've been able to collect over the last 100 years, and even in the last 10 years. We know what good learning looks like. We know how it needs to be relevant, how it needs to be engaging. You guys are talking about personalization, how it can be personalized. We know how it can be personal, right? That's the next phase of this. It's not just personalized learning, but personal learning. How does my cultural influence affect my learning? How does my personal experience impact my learning? We know these things. We just haven't been able to implement them because of the scale numbers that we use, right? The one-to-many kind of factor in our education system. We know what good learning looks like. We don't need to invent anything new. You guys can just spend the summer, go find the greatest research that you know that exists about what good learning looks like, and ask yourselves, how do we use technology to bring these things to life? Challenge the technology industry, not use what's available to you, but say, hey, I want technology to do A, B, and C, and it's not doing it, and it needs to get to that level. Have your students build it. We know what good learning looks like. We need to be able to implement it. That's number one. Number two is, unlike when I took that computer science class and I'd never seen a computer, technology's wrapped itself around the core of everything that we do, and we don't even recognize it anymore. For example, how many of you have not used technology today? 9 o'clock in the morning. How many of you have not used the web? My favorite scream out on that was some teacher said, not me. I just check my email, but that's it. How long did it take us to get to this point? The iPhone is going to be 10 years old this summer. The BlackBerry, God forbid you have a BlackBerry. I've discovered there are two types of BlackBerry users. Those that are embarrassed to have one, and those that are like, you're gonna pray this thing out of my dead cold hands. That's only 13 years old. Do you remember we used to have to call the internet? Like, place a phone call to the internet with our home phones, and the internet was busy. And you were okay with that. You're like, I tried to call the internet, it was busy. I'll just try later. And the person you're talking to is like, did you try another number? You had like a list of numbers you can call the internet with. And someone had a secret number the other people didn't know about. And what was your reward when you got online? It was a bunch of web pages with words to links to other web pages that had words. And you were excited by this. And every once in a while, someone would post a picture on one of those sites and you'd lose your mind. And you're like, there's a picture coming. You know, come back in half an hour. There will be a picture on my computer screen. And today, what's your expectation? If you read my blog, you know I'm a huge fan of teachers. I support all of the things that we can do with professional development and teachers. I think teachers are the most patient, the most understanding people in the world, and I've seen you turn into a mob at conferences when the Wi-Fi is too slow. Like, you lose your mind, like pitchforks and everything. Like, let's burn him! Like, you like, literally go crazy at conferences when the Wi-Fi is too slow. And if that's true for us, the generation that was minding our own business when this thing called the internet showed up, what does that mean for a generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before Google? A generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before tablets and laptops and smartphones and all the technology that's in front of them. A generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before Wi-Fi. We know what the world looked like before Wi-Fi. Go tell a 10-year-old kid that you're going to go stay at a place this summer that doesn't have Wi-Fi. And they're like, what? We're staying in a cave? Where are we going? They just expect it to be there. Now, it's important to point out that I'm not saying that just because this generation is born with technology as part of their lives, that makes them special. I would be careful of anyone who would stand up here and tell you, this generation, they're wired different, their brains work differently, they can multitask, and they can be on their laptops and their computers and their iPods and all this at the same time, and no, they can't. They do two things at the same time poorly, just like we do two things at the same time poorly. We don't need to be afraid of them, they're just like us. But how they think about learning is different than the way we think about learning, and we have to remind ourselves of that almost every day. That how we learn is different than the way they learn because of the environment that they're born into. This is a picture of my 16-year-old, like 3 years ago, coming into my office, and I took a picture of him because he's showing me his lines of code. And he's not showing off that his lines of code. He has an issue. He's got a bug, and he can't fix it, and he wants me to help him. I didn't even know he was learning how to code. I work at Google, and he didn't ask me where he should learn how to code. He just started learning how to code. He was working and doing some stuff in Minecraft, and he had some server space, and him and his friends were running a casino, and I don't know. The fact that the FBI didn't break down my door is amazing to me. But he taught himself how to code. He didn't wait for someone to teach him how to code. He didn't say, hey, I wonder which teacher can teach me how to code, or I wonder what class I can take. He just went online and taught himself how to code. Kids have access to all the world's information at their fingertips. How do we take advantage of that? How do we take advantage of the fact that they don't know any better? Because if you think about what this generation is facing, the superintendent talked a lot about this, the things that we think about now in terms of the future, we haven't even scratched the surface. This is a generation that's growing up with the ability to go anywhere. Virtual reality is, at the very beginning of what's possible. The fact that you can put on a pair of glasses and go anywhere and visit anything and see any museum and experience anything. And, how many of you have ever been to Gettysburg? Put on a pair of glasses and you could be in Gettysburg. How many of you have visited museums in Italy? Put on a pair of glasses and you can go visit museums in Italy. The ability to have empathy, to feel, to see. We're at the very beginning of what's possible with this. And then as we take that kind of virtual world and blend it in with the real world, the possibilities go way beyond Pokemon Go. The things that we can do with augmented reality, the ability of being able to have data at your fingertips. Like, I can't wait. I hope that someday when I'm having a surgery of any kind, that the doctor has a pair of AR glasses on and he's getting live data right in his viewpoint about everything that's happening. And if there's an issue, that he's got data right in it, that he can look at everything. The ability of AR to do so many different things. We're at the very beginning of this. As we think about preparing kids for jobs, we have to recognize that a lot of the jobs are being replaced by little orange things like this. If you get a chance to go visit an Amazon warehouse, I went one where there's 6 giant football field warehouse and like 6 people work there. Because the rest of them are these guys. And even if you could find jobs that people do, physical jobs, for example, those things are going to be done by things like this. Go watch videos of Boston Dynamics and what's happening with robotics. You want to freak out a kid, go watch a video called Handle at Boston Dynamics, and that 9-foot creature that can jump 4 feet high and run all over the place, and what we can do with automation with that. And even if we can get away from that, the fact that there are 4.5 million people in this country that drive things for a living, what are they going to do in 10 years? You can buy self-driving cars today. What's that technology going to look like in 10 years? People are driving things, packages, deliveries, everything, right? Just get on the road. What happens when that world goes away? This is what this generation is facing. And so what we need to do, as the superintendent mentioned, is really focus on skills. Because we don't know what the jobs of the future are going to be. And even that idea, 21st century skills, which I get why we use that idea, that we've been talking about this for so long that we don't even recognize that we're 17 years into the 21st century. You have kids that are going to be starting in the fall that are going to be around in the 22nd century. So I'm about to show you a slide, and the most amazing thing about this slide is that it's not amazing at all. It's a slide of the skills that are needed the most in the workplace. We asked employers all over the world, what are the skills that you need? And this is what they came up with. And you've seen this list. You just talked about, the superintendent talked about this list. Problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, all critical thinking, all these things that we've been talking about for a long time. And here's the interesting thing about this. When we asked employers, what are the skills that you need from employees, you got to also recognize that 70% of Generation Z kids, this is the kids that we're talking about that are in our school systems today, 70% of them don't really want to work for you at all. They want to do their own thing. So these skills become even more important in that world. So again, because we've been talking about these skills for a long time, we think we know how to get to them. We think we know what the questions are that we need to ask. And what I want us to do today is look at these things from a different perspective. For example, we talked a little bit about this in the introduction. We still ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? That question needs to stop. That question used to make sense when we were kids, when there were like 20 jobs, right? You could be a lawyer, a doctor, or an architect, an astronaut. You had general categories of jobs. That's not true anymore. So what we should be asking kids is, what problem do you want to solve? Because there's a couple of things that happen with that question. Number one is, the problem doesn't matter. The problem could be, how to get my mother to buy me bomb pops. It doesn't matter what the problem is. It's the process of problem solving. The problem's going to change over time. It's how you solve problems that matter. But then there's a more important question after that question, which is, that's the problem? What do you need to learn to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to solve that problem? Who's solving that problem today, and what skills do they have? How did they develop those skills? What classes could you be taking, online, offline? We think about the classes that you guys offer your students. That's 1/1000th of the classes that are available to your kids and programs all over the world that they can be taking. Who's solving this problem? How can you collaborate with them? What research is out there that you should be diving into? What research doesn't exist that you can start? What newsletters and videos and websites and so on and so on and so on, because they have the world at their fingertips. These are our Google Science Fair winners. I hope all your students are entering the Google Science Fair when we launch it every year. The girl there in the middle is one of my favorite winners because she was described as not your typical science student, whatever that means. But there was a problem that she wanted to solve. She had a friend who lived in the Philippines, and her friend didn't have electricity, and she was upset by this. By the way, as a side note, those of you who have teenage kids at home right now, that I know they're home playing online with their friends, and some of those friends they've never met in their lives, and you think they're not real friends. Just because we were stuck with the 5 kids who lived on our block doesn't mean that our kids have to suffer the same fate. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So she went and invented a flashlight that's powered by the heat of the human hand. And she was 15 years old when she did this. I have 100 examples of students just like that can do some amazing things if we open up the opportunity to them. If we give them the opportunity to show us what they can do, they can blow our minds. So that's one. That's problem solving. 2, critical thinking. Where does critical thinking come from? Does it come from reading? Yes. Does it come from research? Yes. It comes from doing. And yet we give kids endpoints. A kid hands you something and you say, here's a B+. You are done. We don't live in that world. We live in a world of constant and consistent iteration. That's where critical thinking comes from. It comes from A to B to C to D to E to F. There is no endpoint anymore. We are no longer we're no longer impressed by new and improved Tide. We just expect it to be new and improved. If you used Google last night and used it again today, there's probably a good chance you used a different version of Google because we updated 600 plus times a year. Google Apps, what we call G Suite now, it's going to take me 2 years to say G Suite, but G Suite gets updated 200 plus times a year. The Chromebook team launches a new operating system every 6 weeks, not every 6 years. We live in a world of constant and consistent iteration. How do we teach our kids to constantly iterate? To show them assessments, to show them like, great, you moved from this point to this point. This is what you did well. This is what you need to improve on. But there is no A or B or C. It's just constant iteration. How do we build that into our school models? Collaboration is something that we talk about in education all the time, but we don't mean it. We don't. Let's just admit it. Because education is still set up in the old world. It's set up as a single-player sport. The problem is we live in a team-based world. It's my 6-year-old who's responsible for his grades, his tests, his assignments, and then he's supposed to go work with others. Imagine as teachers, you hand out a typical test, not quizzes. I'm a big fan of quizzes, but let's say some test, some end of chapter test, or whatever it is. But at the end of that test, 2 kids come up to you holding the test together, saying, we decided to combine our skill set and work on this together. What would your reaction be? Now, seriously, flip that in my world. I'm going to go down to Sundar. I'm going to go back to campus today. I'm going to go to Sundar. Sundar, the CEO of Google, for those of you who don't know, here's the education plan. I did it all by myself. I'm sorry, did I work with anybody on the team? No, they don't even know I did this. Did I talk to stakeholders and customers? Did I collaborate on this? No, this is all me. I swear, nobody helped me with this. How long would I have my job for? We live in a world of collaborations, how things get done. And here's the thing, not to get cheesy, because being in New York in the room, I'm supposed to be tough, but there's something comforting and beautiful about knowing that whatever I build is only going to get better when I put it in front of my team. That whatever I build only gets better. That I'm not looking, when I give someone something, I'm not looking for validation, because you also have to be careful when someone asks you for feedback. Are they looking for feedback or validation? What we want is real feedback. I want you to take this thing, and we do that all the time, right? If somebody shows you something, a blog post, and like, will you look at this and edit it? You're like, oh yeah, I will, but here's some edits. I'm not saying that you're a bad writer. We do that whole apology thing, as opposed to just giving them good feedback. How do we build real collaboration into our systems where kids are learning real collaboration skills like the ability to listen, the ability to ask good questions, the ability to give feedback, the ability to change your mind, which is a problem that we're facing right now really badly, the ability to build consensus. One of the things that we look for at Google is called leadership. And do you think by leadership we mean, can you tell people what to do and they'll just follow you blindly? No, we're saying, can you lead by influence? Can you build consensus? Can you take a step back and let someone else lead? How do we build real collaboration into our models? And I'm not talking about group work where you give 5 kids 1 paper assignment and 1 kid does it and the other 4 kids skate by. Talk about real collaboration, like basketball collaboration, where the one guy can't play the game by himself. Again, anyone have a ticket? Okay, sorry. And finally, what we need to do is build real digital leaders. Just because they're born with technology doesn't mean they know how to use technology. There's a great Stanford study that I recommend you guys read and it scared me, where 82% of elementary school kids can't tell you the difference between a sponsored website and a real news site. That's scary. Because those elementary school kids one day are going to come work at my company I'm going to ask them to do research and put some data together for a presentation I need to give to my board, and I'm not going to know if it's real or not. How do we build real digital leadership skills into our kids? The ability to search, to vet, to make sure something is real or not real, to question things, to look deeper than the first page of a Google result. And if they don't know how to learn how to do this in school, where are they going to learn how to do this? At home? We need to build these skills into everything that we do in our schools. So here's what I think we need. We need a culture shift. Again, I'm not saying education is broken. I'm saying that the world has changed. We need to recognize that, take the best of what good education looks like, and bring education to the next level. So we can still do traditional things that we've done. We just need to add to that, or take some of the things out, recognize the things that we don't need to do as much anymore, and supplement that with things that we do need to do. For example, one of the debates I get into all the time is, should kids memorize things or not memorize things? It's not a debate. The answer is both. I have a 2-year-old. The last year, she's been in the bathtub at night. I give her a bath every chance I get. And I have those letters that stick to the side of the bathtub. And like a year I've been working on this. I pull out the A and I go, what's this? And she goes, A. And I beam with pride at her genius. And then I pull out the B and I go, what's this? And she goes, A. I'm like, all right, we need to work on this. And now, pulling out letters, and she knows the letters. It's been a year we've been working on this. I want her to memorize letters. I don't want her Googling letters. Wait, I don't know if that's possible. Yeah, I guess it is. But, okay, Google, what's an X? I don't want her Googling letters and numbers. I want her to memorize lots of things. But at some point, it doesn't make sense anymore. At some point, we need to recognize that just memorizing things for the sake of memorizing things doesn't make sense. My kid had to memorize he's taking Spanish. He had to memorize the Spanish capitals of all the Spanish countries. And he was walking around the house memorizing all the Spanish capitals. He got 100%. And then on the last day of school, he gets in a car and go, hey, what's the Spanish capitals of all the Spanish countries? He got 3 of them. We know it doesn't work. We need to ask better questions, right? There's that stat that comes out about every kind of national holiday. The last one I saw, one of my favorite ones is about how 7% of Americans can name you the first 4 presidents of the United States. And that's supposed to be a bad thing, and it probably is. And I can point to one of you in this room. Ooh, the vibe in the room has changed. People are looking away from me. I can point to one of you and ask you to name me the first 4 presidents, and if you don't know, you're going to be embarrassed. And other people are going to make fun of you because you didn't know who the first 4 presidents were. Even though they didn't know who the first 4 presidents were. They just didn't get called on. Sound familiar? Or, I can give all of you 30 seconds, and all of you can tell me who the first 4 presidents are. Information has no value, it's a commodity. What is valuable is what we do with that information. The question isn't who are the first 4 presidents, the question is, what are the 3 things the first 4 presidents agreed on? What are the 3 things they disagreed on? Who won those arguments, and how did that shape our country? What would the United States look like if Thomas Jefferson was our first president? We'd all be speaking French. I'd start there. We can ask better questions. We can get kids to remember things. Because I bet you 20 years from now, those kids will remember who the first 4 presidents are. It's about getting to the answers that we're looking for, asking better questions. And the good news is we're starting to see this shift. And I was warmed my heart to hear your superintendent talking about these things today, about student-centric learning, where kids are driving the learning, where technology is there to enable and support what good learning looks like. Technology is not the answer. Technology is not the silver bullet. Education is the silver bullet. Technology is there to support and enable great learning. Kids have to drive the learning in collaborative settings, and we're starting to see this across the country. We're starting to see more professional development for teachers, more focused on the things that you really need to be able how to do, like build collaboration circles, have student agency, create equity and access, all these cool things that we need to really focus on. We're starting to see some really good professional development, and we need to encourage this. But we also need to encourage leadership at school districts to give you guys space and room to experiment and try different things. And it seems like you guys have it here, to try different things, to experiment, to iterate, to see what you can do with what's possible. Because what we need to do is move away from this. And we all know that. And what our education system should look more like is like this, where kids are making things and building things together, where technology is there to support great learning. I'll give you a Google example of what this looks like. This is the original Google.com. This is it. This is where it started, just down the road, up the road, wherever we are. This is Larry and Sergey putting a bunch of machines together. This is what it looked like. And then this is what Google looks like today. This is one row of the gazillions of rows of data centers, of servers, in data centers all over the world. And there's three things I want to point out. Number one, even though this happened just down the road, this can happen anywhere today. You don't need to be in a computer lab. You don't need to be near big machines and big boxes. The cloud gives us the opportunity for 4 kids to grab a couple of Chromebooks and laptops and do Google anywhere in the world. That's fascinating. Number 2 is that this is not what Google looked like on Monday, and this is what it looked like on Thursday. This took 18 years of what we're talking about here. 18 years of problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, all the things that we need to do. It took us 18 years of doing that to get here. And the third thing is that this is not what a data center will look like 18 years from today. There is no future data center. Just like there is no future classroom. There's just the next cable, the next light, the next casing, the next hardware, the next software update, and constant iteration and innovation. There is no future classroom. The future classroom starts on Monday, or in your case, a couple Mondays from now. And then Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then Thursday. It's this constant approach to iteration and innovation that we need. Here's the good news. We are just getting started. You guys, you're the generation, whether you like it or not, that's going to be creating what that future of education looks like. The teachers following you will follow your pattern of innovation and iteration. And we're at the very beginning of this. We're not behind. In 1995, which wasn't that long ago, 1% of the world was online. It took 10 years to get to the first billion people, 5 years to get to the second billion, and 4 years to get to the third billion. And yet today, as we sit here in the capital of technology in the world, only 40% of the world is online. We're at the very beginning of this. Technology is finally useful, finally affordable, finally getting to the point where we can use it in education. Here's the other good news. Everything that we just talked about today is possible and doable. I know because we're doing it in Phoenix. I started a school in Phoenix called the Phoenix Coding Academy in Phoenix, Arizona. And this is not a charter school. It's not a private school. This is a school inside the Phoenix Union School District. And what I mean I started it is I went to the superintendent and the school board and said, let's build a different kind of school. And we built the Phoenix Coding Academy, where we took computer science and we embed it into all the subjects. So kids are taking biology with computer science, and art with computer science, and history with computer science, where computer science is a project language that they use in all their projects across multidisciplinary programs that teachers create. We started last year with 9th grade. We're adding 10th grade. Every year we're adding another grade. And again, this is not a private school. There's not extra funding for this. This is a regular high school. Even in Arizona is a right to go wherever you want state. And the application process that we use were not based on grades, not based on test scores. It was, what problem do you want to solve and how do you want to use technology to solve that problem? And we took the kids in. We tried to match it up where it's 50% boys and 50% girls. We're 60 and 40, so we're going to keep working on it. There are no grades in the school. There's no homework in the school because homework is an equity issue. And what was the secret formula that we used for this? What was the magic that we came up with? We hired 9 teachers and a principal 9 months before the school started, hired them full-time, and said to the biology teacher, You're going to teach biology and computer science at the same time. Here's a blank sheet of paper. Good luck. We'll see you in 9 months. And they build it together. That's the magic. And they're going to keep working on it, keep getting better at it, and then we're going to add more teachers, and they're going to keep doing it. We're just going to keep iterating and doing different things. I'm going to be teaching a storytelling class there next year. And these kids are amazing. And the reaction in the community has been great. And the students, my favorite thing about the school is that you show up to the school at 7:50 in the morning. School starts at 8, and there's no one outside the school. And you're like, wait, do people just show up at the school at 7:59? No, at 7:50, everybody's already inside. They've been there for an hour working on their projects. So I'm amazed. The school's better than I expected. So as I close out here, and we think about the future, I want you to think about a 5-year-old. And then I want you to think about whatever your latest, greatest technology is. Your Chromebook, your MacBook Pro, your MacBook Pro with touchy things, your Chromebooks, your Surface tablets, your iPhones, your iPhones extra large, I don't know what they're called, your, whatever they are, your iPad that's this big. You walk around like this. Whatever it is, mine is the Pixel, the latest and greatest phone from Google. That now feels old because it was a year ago. This is the latest and greatest technology from the most innovative company in the world. It's a commercial. I'm kidding. I want you to think about this latest and greatest technology from the most innovative company in the world. And I want you to think about that 5-year-old and realize that this is the worst technology that 5-year-old will ever see in their life. This is their Commodore 64. In 20 years, they're going to be shopping in a thrift store. And they're going to find this in a box in the back corner with all the other phones that are in that box. And you're like, oh, I have to have one of these. You guys, my dad had one of these. Yo, no, I remember he had one of these. Because they're going to want to bring it home and put on their shelf like a museum piece. The way I know some of you have old technology sitting on your shelf like museum pieces. And they're going to remember, and they're going to be with like younger siblings or younger people with them. They're going to say, you guys, look, you're not going to believe me. But that there right there, that's the port. You're not going to believe this, but my father used to have to plug this into the wall. And the kid's like, what? What do you mean? Like take it out of the box and plug it in and never have to plug it in again? No! Every day he had to plug this into the wall. Every day? Like what? Like for like a second? No! For hours! This thing was plugged into the wall. He couldn't go anywhere with it. It was just plugged there overnight. Those are the 5-year-olds who are coming into our school system in the fall. Are we ready for them? Do we have the right infrastructure? Do we have the right learning models for them? What do we need to do to build an innovation and iteration culture so that these kids can come in and build the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that they're going to need to thrive, to solve the problems that they're interested in solving? That's what we need to focus on. That's our calling. That's what we need to do. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you guys very much.